Reform UK. They've been in the news recently after gaining their very first MP, the half-man, half-tombstone Lee Anderson. Their pledges are simple. They want to abandon the UK's commitment to reduce carbon emissions. They want to pull the woke nonsense out of our classrooms and stop those bloody boats. Today we're going to talk about the history of Reform UK, their leader Richard Tice, and perhaps we'll talk about why his bold choice to go without eyebrows makes him look like a geriatric Lego man. Reform UK began life as the Brexit Party. Its first leader was Catherine Blakelock, an Oxford-educated woman who reckons food banks are causing obesity. Work that one out. She resigned after Hope Not Hate uncovered a bunch of dodgy tweets about Muslims and white genocide and stuff, and in doing so, she set the standard for the quality of politicians the party would ultimately attract. She then handed the reins over to Nigel Farage, a man not totally unfamiliar to the channel. Presumably, she wanted a leader that was of pure English blood, and if you can't tell by the fact that his teeth look like the fence surrounding a haunted mansion, he very much fits the bill. In the early years of the Brexit Party's existence, Nigel Farage said that, in terms of policy, there's no difference at all between the Brexit Party and UKIP. The difference was in its personnel. Considering the support for any given political party is downstream from the policies it advocates for, I'm not sure this is the glowing endorsement he thinks it is. Regardless, let's not pretend that the party has left the scum of the earth behind with our mate Tommy Robinson. In 2019, they had to kick their treasurer Michael McGough out as well. At first, I presumed it was because he had clearly stolen Richard Tice's eyebrows and grafted them onto his own to monopolise the party's facial hair, but it turns out he was just tweeting anti-Semitic stuff about Jewish politicians. Nigel had led the party between 2019 and 2021 and had done a surprisingly good job of giving it some legs. He had built an image for himself over the years by drinking excessively and refusing to brush his teeth. Oh, no, sorry, let me try that again. He'd built an image for himself over the years by leading the UK Independence Party for about 3 years. If you dislike the EU, dislike immigrants, and dislike facts, the chances are you valued Farage as a politician. When he left UKIP to lead the Brexit Party, the voters, moved along with him. At that time, the Brexit Party was quite literally a single-issue party. The life cycle of your average Brexit Party rep was to wake up, eat a full English, scream about how the EU was a crock of shit, tweet about how migrants are destroying the country, grab a perfectly English curry and get home in time to watch Green Street. In 2019, however, they needed to make a tough choice. See, there was a general election on the books. Labour was led by Jeremy Corbyn and the Conservatives led by Boris Johnson. Brexit was a key issue in the country and the Brexit Party was looking poised to pull vote share away from the Conservatives. The truth is, the Conservatives were proven to be as appropriate a choice for delivering Brexit as Lucy Letby was for delivering children, and their pro-Brexit voter base were getting somewhat fucked off. In an attempt to prevent the election being handed over to Corbyn, Nigel agreed to pull his candidates from any seat that was currently occupied by a Conservative MP. Nigel threw in his public support for Boris and announced that once he delivered the Brexit of our dreams, which he definitely would, the party would also be renamed to Reform UK. The Brexit Party emerged from the election with 0 seats. Regardless, Nigel's plan to keep Corbyn out of power went swimmingly. Boris nailed the whole Brexit thing and everyone was happy, probably. And, as promised, the Brexit Party rebranded to Reform UK and began to shift focus. Instead of being a party focused on doing a Brexit, they would instead focus on reducing taxes, cutting government spending, and to make Britain great again, TM. In March 2021, Nigel Farage stepped down as the leader of Reform UK and was replaced by the then chairman of the party, Richard Tice. That leads me to my next question. Who the fuck is Richard Tice? Well, here's the lowdown. He was born in 1964, he's a privately educated property guy that studied construction economics and quantity surveying at Salford University. His grandfather was a famous property developer, and his family runs a property firm called the Sunley Group. He worked as a housing developer for a bit, joined the family company in 1991 and became the joint CEO by 1993. So if anyone knows anything about what the working class man needs, it's this privately educated nepotistic child that graduated into a directorship of his family's multi-million-pound property empire. After floating around doing the standard boring corporate property whatever the fuck, he started dipping his toes into politics. Truth be told, he'd spent a tipful of money donating to the Conservative Party over the years, but in 2015 he decided to get properly stuck in when he co-founded the Leave EU campaign. That means he was one of the people to see Nigel Farage's Breaking Point poster and thought, yeah, that looks totally fine and I have no problem with it at all. He was elected as an MEP in 2019 for the East of England and stood as the Brexit Party candidate in the general election. He got a solid 25% of the vote share, but ultimately fell into third place as Labour's Mike Hill took the seat. Richard is a man who believes the government is taking away your freedom, but also advocates for restricting your freedom to protest the government. He believes that the bloody wokerati nonsense should be kept out of our schools, and while he can't point to an example of what specifically needs to be removed from the syllabus, what he does know is that boys have willies, girls have fannies, and that's final. Okay, so we're up to speed on where they came from, so what are they doing right now? Well, they're actually doing quite well for a smallish, newish political party. On May 11th, they gained their first MP, Lee Anderson, after his shock exit from the Conservative Party. Well, I say shock, he was suspended by the Conservatives for claiming that Sadiq Khan and Keir Starmer are being controlled by Islamists. Just take a second to understand that he was too racist for the current Conservative Party, who, as I type this sentence, are defending one of their largest donors, stating that Diane Abbott made him want to hate all black women and that she should be shot. He might have been too racist for them, but he's got a way to go before he's too racist for Reform UK. A couple of weeks ago, Richard Tice and Lee Anderson held a press conference to answer questions regarding his defection to Reform, and it was really weird. Lee said that places like Ashfield have been let down by his previous party, and the people were made promises in 2019 that just have not been delivered. The only minor niggle I have with that is that Lee was the MP for Ashfield at the time. Judging by how he answered the questions at this press meeting, he gets all of his facts and reasoning from his 80-year-old mum. If you take his word for it, she's more tuned into the conflict in Gaza and our immigration policy than half the cunts who are paid to deal with it anyway. And while I don't see his joining as the gigantic win they seem to have, it's still a win for the party, at least given their ambitions. A very public defection from the Conservatives to Reform is opening the gates to other MPs, members and voters to follow suit. According to YouGov polling, the voting intention towards Reform UK at the next election sits at around 15%, which is pretty impressive. You, like I, might think that these guys are just a bunch of old cunts obsessed with the memory of Britain when Freddos were 5p, when you barely had to fork out $5,000 to get your hands on a large semi, stop it, and your local chippy was as cheap as, well, chips. But this nostalgia is being sold to voters who also long for those days, and it's extremely effective. It doesn't matter if it's possible, what matters is someone saying something that they like the sound of. While I do think that Reform's candidates are, for the most part, fucking mental, it's easier to see why people find them exciting. Their manifesto states that they want to reduce the NHS wait times to 0, that they want to increase the base rate tax threshold from $12,000 to $20,000, and that they will cut energy prices. The problem is that these proposals are basically uncosted. I mean, they kind of are, give or take a few dozens of billions here and there, but I don't think the manifesto is really written to actually be viable. I think they're aware that their chances of getting into office are basically nil, so they can afford to promise you the world in order to swing your vote. Putting aside the uncosted promises of unicorns and infinite sloppy toppy, they also plan to completely abandon the UK's pledge to become carbon neutral by 2050. For those that plan to, be alive for a couple more decades, this might be a bit of a sticking point, but there are, let's say, skeptics that welcome this proposal. I don't want to demean anyone, that's not my style, but if you don't believe climate change is an issue worth solving, you are, with all the respect in the world, a functionally brain-dead gimp, and I wouldn't so much as trust you to blow your own nose without an instructional video. But maybe I'm getting a bit caught up in the top-level politics of the party, so let's have a look at a real-life example of Reform UK's prospective MPs. My Reform UK candidate is a man named Kevin Chippendall Higgin, and he's a man who believes that the country is, quote, faced with ruin as the direct result of 25 years of socialism. This is a bit of a red flag for me. I mean, I'm not big into socialism, but if you think that's what we've been experiencing for the last 25 years, you either have no idea what you're talking about, or you've been snorting a bit too much of the devil's dandruff. Despite the apparently rampant socialism ravaging the country under the Conservatives since 2010, he remained a member of the party until 2014 after one of the councillors he was mates with stopped replying to his emails. Socialism sucks after all, but he apparently draws the line at poor inbox management. He reckons that budgets need to be slashed everywhere, but also we need more police, we need stronger and faster sentencing of criminals, that we need to police our borders more effectively, that we need to open migrant processing centres offshore, that we need to reduce hospital wait times to zero, and that we should be funding a voucher system for patients to go private if wait times are exceeded. He believes that climate change isn't real because we can't grow peaches in Fareham, and he believes that wokeism is the new fascism. The guy shares anti-vax videos on his Facebook page, and while you might be inclined to believe that this politically minded guy would have done the appropriate research, he apparently wasn't bothered enough to research whether or not Facebook was planning to steal his nudes when he shared this complete pile of bollocks. My conclusion is that, without meaning to be rude, he's wetter than a mermaid's minge. I don't want to shit too hard on the guy, but if you don't believe in climate change and sincerely believe that wokeism is literally fascism, I really do find it hard to take you seriously about anything at all. Now, rather than ending this video by further explaining the problems with Reform UK, I wanted to take a little bit of time to explain the problem with how we're addressing Reform UK. I'm a millennial. And I think that millennials are really good at just calling people far right, then fucking off about our day as if we've single-handedly destroyed their political credibility. At the end of the day, their voters are real, and the problems they're identifying, rightly or wrongly, are resonating with those voters. And look, I get it. A lot of people don't like to vote because they think the system's failed and all that cool shit, but whether you consider it your democratic right or a necessary evil, you simply need to vote. Not voting at all because you don't like the current government is like refusing to eat vegetables because you hate vegans. You're cutting your own nose off to spite someone else's face. Please understand that we are currently suffering the very predictable, very real economic pains of a poorly negotiated Brexit. And don't forget that this was the number one most preferential outcome for Reform UK. They actively campaigned for a no-deal Brexit and have the gall to stand before you today and state that the reason why Brexit failed was because this gaggle of virgins weren't there to slide a blank slip of fucking paper across the negotiating table. With all that being said, the support generated in recent months for Reform UK is, for me, nothing unexpected given the performance of the Conservative government. Rishi Sunak has properly fucked it. His leadership is under intense scrutiny as we speak, and they are absolutely pissing votes and MPs up the wall. Most polls show that, while Reform are pulling larger numbers than they expected, it will only end up playing into Labour's hands as they drag down the Tories. Add in a first-past-the-post voting system, and it's not looking likely that they'll win any seats at all in the upcoming general election. Still, go out and vote though, yeah? Labour, Greens, Lib Dems, the Communist League for children that can't read good, I don't give a fuck. Just do me a favour, go out and vote for someone that isn't a complete fucking knob. Thank you for watching. If you like this video, please do like and subscribe, it really helps. Just a public service announcement before I sign off. In light of there being a general election this year, I'd like to do a full review of each party's manifestos as and when they're released. I'm trying to decide whether or not to do some live streams where we can chat and have a read and hang out, or if you'd prefer shorter, more succinct videos because you've all got shit to do. Let me know what you'd prefer and I'll do this the democratic way. A huge thank you to my amazing and wonderful patrons. If you'd like to be among their number, you can support from just £1 a month. The link is in the description. Love you. Bye bye.